In today's video, we are talking about a crucial topic for special education teachers: how to run effective and efficient IEP meetings. And welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel from the Behavior Check-In, and I'm a behavior special education teacher and coach in Florida. And today we're going to dive into how to have effective IEP meetings. When I was a brand new baby teacher, an IEP meeting was like the scariest possible thought for me. Planning it, writing it, conducting it, basically sitting in that meeting and being the one running everything had me completely overwhelmed. So I want to put together a video that will hopefully help you feel a lot more comfortable holding IEP meetings. If you're a more experienced teacher and you're hoping to hone in your skills a little bit, hopefully you'll learn some tips that'll help you. Now, some of you know I am also a parent of a child with an IEP. So I have been on the side as the teacher and I've been on the side of a parent, and I've seen many good things and I've seen some things not go well. But I will say the one thing that I really appreciate when I show up to a meeting is that it is straight to the point, it's concise, we cover what we need to cover, efficient. That is one of the most important things to keep in mind. So if you go in not prepared for the meeting, then it's going to be all over the place. And that is why you want to kind of plan ahead. Really planning ahead is the best step for you when having an IEP meeting, because the more you have preparation up front, just the quicker and more efficient it's going to go. Some of the meetings that have gone on and drawn on forever and ever, you can tell people were not prepared. And that's just frustrating for everybody involved. So a successful IEP meeting actually begins before you even start the meeting. It all begins with the preparation that you put into it. Now, I like to use the IEP as an actual guide, but it's also very helpful to have kind of an outline of what you're going to do that you can share with the other team members, so they don't have people like jumping and talking all over each other. If they have that in front of them, they know when they're supposed to talk, when it's their time to share. I have been in meetings where you can have certain team members who just want to talk and share, and not everybody gets to their part, and then things get rushed and people feel left out. So I do think it's really helpful to create an agenda prior. Another thing that will keep you on time is to make sure that you have your draft done well ahead of time. This is best practice to send out a draft to parents. Depending on the district, some people will say a week ahead of time, 5 to 7 days ahead of time. It just depends on what your protocol is, but you want to give the parent enough time to be able to look over everything on their own, make highlights, suggestions, so they can ask questions, because this is about their child and it's very important for them to be well informed. I think so many parents don't want to come across as unknowledgeable because they're afraid they're going to look like a bad parent. So they come in and they don't really ask questions and they don't really know what to say. And a lot of that, I think, is just because they don't know. But here's my thing. If you're a parent watching this, I think it's very important for you to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with you highlighting things and asking for clarification, or maybe even asking for something to be written a little bit differently if you don't understand it or you feel like it's not clear. So sending home a draft is really important to the parent. It's giving them that opportunity to review everything so they can come into the meeting and have questions prepared, which will make things go a lot smoother as well, because they're not sitting there trying to figure out on the fly what they're going to ask and forgetting things and then having to come back or even schedule meetings later on because they didn't get all the information until way too late, or they didn't have enough time to process the information. It's also really important to share these drafts with everybody who's going to be in the meeting so they have a chance to view over it as well and understand where their part is and to talk and speak about what they have. It also allows everybody to read over, look for any typos, anything that's not coherent, anything that doesn't kind of align. When you're writing an IEP, you write a lot of them, and sometimes, it helps to have a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes look over what you have, just to make sure that everything is in there and is the best written IEP that you can put forth. So it really is helpful to let everybody look at that. Another thing in being prepared for the meeting is to make sure you have a copy of your procedural safeguards, have your pens, have tissues, All of those things are very important to have in the meeting. All those things will come in handy in having them in the meeting because they're probably going to be needed at some point. Have everything there. It makes the meeting run a whole lot smoother. Also, you want to make sure that you have draft copies. You want to be able to have copies for everybody that's there. If you don't have to do paper copies, then if you can present it on a big screen, that can be really helpful. Or if other team members have access and they can look at it on their screen, if you're trying to save paper, whatever. But I like to make sure that the parent has a hard copy in front of them, and that is the most updated IEP. So if anything had maybe like fixed some typos or some service minutes or something, when you send home the draft after, team members like, oh, we need to fix that, then you want to give them that and then address to the parents, hey, we did update this from the draft that I sent home because I talked to the speech pathologist and she said we actually wanted to try to propose doing this amount of minutes or whatever. But you want to make sure that they have the most updated copies and versions in front of them. It's just so much easier to have things in paper in front of them. And honestly, I like to get those little arrow stickies and put them on really important places that I want to make sure the parents take a look at, especially if we have any changes in there or anything that's progress that we really want to share. It just kind of catches their eye, draws attention to it. Another thing that I think is really helpful is using those stickies on the places that the parent needs to sign. There's so much stuff you've got to sign in IEP meetings. I always joke that it's like buying a house, and sometimes even I forget where people need to sign things in the minute. So it's really helpful prior to the meeting to go in with the stickies and label the places that the parent and the gen ed teacher and the service providers and anybody who's going to be in the meeting needs to sign so that you have it ready to go. I think this is always very helpful. I also think it's really helpful to present graphs if you're talking about behavior data in a meeting, because it really shows a visual picture to the parent. I like having a visual representation of what we're doing. I like graphs for academics. I like graphs for behavior. I think they're really great to show to the parents. And once again, you can put that on the screen or you can even print that out and share it to parents. But I think that really helps when you're sitting down as a team. If you have work samples, this is always really helpful. I find work samples are probably the most beneficial when you're working with younger students or you're working with students who have intellectual disabilities and maybe the parents don't always see what they're doing or the kids aren't able to articulate it. But work samples are beneficial at any level. I think it's really cool to share an awesome essay that a student put together. When I was in school, my case manager did do that. She brought in an essay that my gen ed teacher was really proud of, and we brought that in and showed it to my mom, and it made me feel proud as a student too. They thought it was so great that they wanted to bring it to a meeting. So work samples can be really helpful, and I advise bringing those just because I think it does help kind of guide the meeting and where you are that you think the child needs more support on. You can show that. Or if you're saying, hey, this student doesn't need as much support, maybe you brought in an essay that was phenomenal and maybe they were having all the support for writing, and you might say, hey, they're doing really well. This was done all independently. Maybe we need to bring back some of those minutes in that writing, or we don't even need them at all, or we can go on consultative. All those things are very helpful, and I think the more that you can present in data, the better off you're going to be. I think that sometimes IEP meetings can feel like they're very one-sided, and I think it's because we don't have the data. So it just sounds like everything's very opinion-based, and sometimes that can leave parents feeling like the school doesn't like their child, or the child feels like the teachers don't like them. And I think it's really beneficial to bring in actual hard evidence to back up your claims and why you're suggesting what you're suggesting for that student. What's really helpful is to make sure you have someone who's taking detailed notes. I have worked in schools where I was asked to do the notes and run the meeting and all of that, and it's way too much. And we were moving more towards a model and having someone else in there help take the notes. And at the school that I just left, we had someone who would come in and actually take the notes in the meeting. I found this to be very helpful to have really good detailed notes, because as a parent and even as a teacher, sometimes so much is discussed in a meeting and it can get so overwhelming you can't really remember what you were talking about. So it's nice to go back and have those notes. And also as a teacher, it's been helpful for me to go back and review them when we're having a meeting, or what we talked about or what we said we were going to do or whatever. I can go back and look in those notes and see that. So it's always really helpful to have someone who who is a note taker in your meeting, and you can ask a colleague to do that, or someone who maybe you could take turns with someone else who's presenting. Just open up a Google Doc or whatever and share it. I've done it that way as well, because obviously it's hard to talk and take notes at the same time. But for example, when the speech pathologist was delivering what she was saying, I was typing her notes in, and then when I was delivering what I was saying as the behavior specialist, she would type in my notes. That's pretty much how we did it to make it easy. But that's just an example of something you can do. But the notes are really helpful. And then of course, at the conclusion of the meeting, before you sign everything, you can have someone read all the notes back to the parents and say, if they're in agreement and how they feel about the notes and anything they want added. And that's very helpful as well in making everybody on the team feel included in what's going on in the meeting. And of course, after you summarize all the meeting notes, you can talk about if you need to do follow-up meetings to discuss further things that maybe you discussed that you weren't ready or you needed more data for, and go ahead and immediately get those set on the books. After you get all the signatures, then you want to make sure that you go ahead and get copies and give them to the parents so they leave with those copies and they have them. I know in situations sometimes you can't always do that, but it is best practice to do that. Plus, it's just one less thing for you to worry about, because if you don't do them right there in the meeting, then you have to remember to do it another time, and you guys send home with the student, and sometimes they don't always make it home with students. So it's a lot easier just let the parent leave with the copy. Just make sure you have everything ready to go for that. Of course, I've been in situations where you were trying and then the copy machine didn't work, but the best practice is to try and get that done so that the parent has that and they can leave with their own copy, and that they left with their copy in hand. The other thing that I think is really important in having an effective IEP meeting is setting a positive tone. IEP meetings aren't always pleasant. As a parent who has a child with an IEP, and as someone who had an IEP herself, I know that sometimes you have to talk about a lot of uncomfortable things that can really cause parents to feel upset. Yes, they know their child, but it's always hard to hear things that are uncomfortable about your child from professionals. And I think it's really important to set a safe space for everybody to talk in a professional and objective manner. We don't want all of our feelings getting involved. And making sure that we are, of course, addressing the things that need to be addressed, but also being positive and supportive and really listening to everybody who's contributing, really listening to the parents as well, because it just makes everybody feel a lot better and more willing to share. And in the end, if everybody can share their ideas and they feel comfortable sharing their ideas, the child is going to benefit the most, and you're going to have the most effective IEP for that child, where they're going to make the progress that they need. And really, in the end, that's what it's all about. There you have it. Those are my steps for running an effective IEP meeting. If you have any suggestions or things that you do that you think are really helpful, leave those below, because it's really helpful for the community. I will also link my IEP agenda resource below. It's free. It's on Teachers Pay Teachers. You can go ahead and grab it for yourself and just use it any way you need to, just as a guide or whatever. And obviously, if you have any questions, you can always ask me below, or you can reach out to me in my email. I'm happy to help and talk with you about that. Once again, thank you so much for coming to my channel, and I will catch you in the next one.